Okay, so today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Normally, I would be doing something that I call morning papers, where for about 30 minutes or so, I would just write anything that I'm thinking about, just kind of free form, stream of consciousness journaling sort of thing. And that works pretty well because I can type pretty fast, but overall, I think that the typing kind of slows down my thoughts enough that I can kind of construct the thoughts as I'm thinking them and only think kind of a short period of time into the future, but I'm going to try them as a spoken morning paper. I don't know what I'm going to call it instead. Maybe just a morning vlog or, I don't know, something based off of like this being called a Pomodoro timer. I don't know where the name comes from. I'll think of something generally, but overall, it's just a combination of kind of naming things is hard. So, um, yeah, so what we're kind of looking at here is a note taking app that is called Roam Research, and it's just basically what I use to coordinate my ideas. And I have kind of like a little workflow that kind of keeps track of what I'm doing as well as new things that I'm learning and turns those new things that I'm learning into ideas, opinions, concepts. And I'm trying to use it right now in order to make kind of um, more complex content in general. So I think that one of the weaknesses that I've had quite frequently is that I like to. I definitely think about things a lot, to the point of overthinking probably, and even when it's about Overwatch or something like that, I very rarely have ever been able to kind of put it outside of my head, and it had happened a lot of my content where I would have a knowledge of kind of how to operate with like Temple of Anubis attack or something like that. Or the most famous example would probably be my anatomy of a team fight discussions or four box methods, things. A lot of these kind of different methods or processes that I use in order to either analyze something or figure it out, help with decision theory, anything like that. But all of those were kind of things that I talked about ad hoc, and I've never really been good at making pre-recorded content before or anything edited. So this is going to be different, this one, because eventually I would like to get up to the point where I am writing out full length, articles, essays, blog posts, preferably around the essays where it's like one concept and I just have a rigorous but hopefully simple explanation of that thing. But right now, my best kind of style of content is live, where and it's like streaming or anything like that. And I think that I'm pretty good at streaming, but the I would really like to be able to be good at creating something that is actually very well produced and static, or on demand instead of live, whether that's a book, again, an essay, a video essay, any kind of like created work on YouTube, for example, just like a video guide. It's pretty easy for me to just turn on stream or make a video recording talking for 10 minutes about patch notes or something. And it's a lot harder to actually think about the patch notes, come up with my ideas about them, and then read them out or kind of structure things with video examples or anything, even though that's kind of a much higher quality product. I'm kind of worse at that. It takes out a lot of the life of the life of the video, I suppose, because whenever I'm doing pre-recorded content or reading off a script or something like that, it always comes across as really dead and dry, drab sort of thing. So I want to get to the point where I can take my thoughts and instead of just trying to explain things ad hoc, which is not very brief, it's not very succinct, it might help people kind of understand things and it might help them walk through it. But, one of the biggest criticisms of my work has always been that I'm pretty condescending or patronizing, which has obviously never been my intent, but I can understand where that sort of thing can come from. In that, if I do explain things over and over again, or sometimes it will happen where I explain something or try to explain something, but I don't quite get it right. So I restart with a new analogy or try and reframe it slightly differently. So sometimes I have these moments where trying to explain a concept simply using an anecdote or an analogy, I have this kind of habit of starting and stopping over time. And at the end result, I mean, some of that might help, where it's kind of the two ideas that I had and were discarded, the fact that they were discarded carries a certain amount of information that has a higher density than if I were to just present the final finished kind of anecdote or analogy that I thought was suitable to the explanation or the concept that I was trying to elucidate. But um, elucidate. I haven't used that word in a while. Is it spelled with an E? Elucidate? Or is it an I? Oh, it's one L. So yeah, one of the things, obviously today you can see it's January 16th, 2021. I've been having a lot of anxiety about making even a very short channel update on YouTube because I'm almost at 250,000 subscribers on YouTube, but I'm going to be moving away from Overwatch content and moving towards variety content. And I don't think that it's, variety content probably isn't the right name for it because it is more of experimental content where I'm trying to find my niche. So it's going to be kind of like playing around for a while and just finding what works, finding what I enjoy doing, and finding what an audience responds to. But I think that a part of this is going to be I want the audience to have some sort of agency over my work, and I think that that kind of takes the form of communities. But I don't know. There's it's an interesting one because I've been thinking more about the parasocial thing, and I think that at some point trying to avoid any parasocial relationships can cause you trying to avoid legitimately good social ones. And even then, excuse me, not all parasocial relationships are bad. Some of them can be good. There's certainly toxic ones. There's ones that might be providing short-term gain for long-term pain, but not all parasocial relationships are bad in the same way that not all social relationships are good. So I think that I need to think more about, or think less about, rather, straight up rejecting parasocial relationships and trying to build places and communities that have positive social or parasocial relationships. And I think that this comes from, um, I think that there's also I'm just going to split because there's this one concept that I'm trying to work through, and there's this one podcast that I was listening to. It's one of my favorite intellectuals, and it was during no, it was during this podcast with Lex Friedman and Yosha Bach, and they were talking about an artificial consciousness and the nature of reality, which might seem a little bit metaphysical, but it was kind of talking about the spirit of it doesn't have to be a person, but whether it's kind of like this you're talking about it like the spirit or the collective consciousness. I think that people kind of want to be in a community that has a specific spirit. And if you're talking about kind of military definitions, esprit de corps, I'm just gonna write this down for the future. Is it esprit de corps? I think that's how you spell it. But it's kind of like, a military unit has a certain esprit de corps, or it's like a spirit to the body of people who make up that wing or that platoon or that squad or anything like that. And I think that one of the things with these communities is that people want to be a part of streamer communities, maybe regardless of what they're doing, because the streamer community they are kind of like have a dictatorial or authoritarian grasp over what the spirit of that community is. So I think that all of the communities that I found, regardless of what they are in, the difference is not going to be what the content that the community does that matters. I think that it's going to be kind of the spirit of the community, the esprit de corps or anything like that. So when I am starting to make communities like Pico, like Port Zero, or anything of that variety, I think that there has to be a huge care and attention to making something that has a stable and developmental spirit to the organization. And I think doing such a thing is really hard because you can't have this sort of steeped cultural knowledge or institutional beliefs right off the start. It's going to adopt the culture of the community or the ecosystem with which the majority of the members originated from. And if you're talking about it being, the Twitch community or the YouTube community or the gaming community or something, there's a lot of those cultural values are not based around any sense of communalism or kind of collaboration or working together. It's, very much a hedonistic, uh, dynamic confederation of ideas and entertainment. And so I think that that's a very challenging thing where kind of one creator themselves can, um, they can artificially enforce this spirit by making the spirit of a community or a collective the spirit of the individual. And I think that this kind of is just a broader concept as well, where you do have this kind of centralized authority on what is right, what is wrong, and some people can see them as either impartial or wise, which when you're talking about things like the Supreme Court, or for example, it's like I was reading about, the authority of like legal systems and where kind of communities are looking for them. And there's a really interesting article about this if you want to read more. It's called Ritual Epistemology. It's written by Sarah Perry from Ribbon Farm. And this is kind of talking about where, the purpose of kind of justice isn't for it to be truthful per se. It's about it to be kind of fair and impartial. And I think that that's, if you can find some sort of person that has that sort of fair and impartiality to it, or rather than being kind of fair and impartial, but is biased towards its members, I think that that sort of thing can be a very kind of cohesive and motivating force for a group. And you can have this sort of thing also apply to, politicians or cult leaders or things like that. I don't think it's really that different. Trying to find something, I struggle to believe that communities develop around utilitarian value. Whether that's how entertaining the content is, how educational content is, how whatever something is. I think that a lot of it does come from alignment, a negotiated alignment. But I'm trying to like compare this to whether you're talking about, tribal fandoms where it's like Rust versus C++, or you're talking about like Intel versus AMD, or anything like that. I'm trying to think about or Xbox versus PlayStation, something like that. I'm trying to because those both have, communities, but they're kind of leaderless communities. And I think that I should probably think about that more, kind of like the leaderless communities. Like, where does the spirit of the Xbox community arise from and what influences it? I think that maybe it's a response to being threatened. What happens if a group of friends, they only have enough money to buy one console, and some people in the group of friends buy Xbox and some group of people buy PS. Then, especially when you go to the next generation console, I think it's probably going to be a contest or a competition to try and get the people who are on Xbox to switch to PlayStation, or vice versa. Something of that variety. I'm not sure if that applies to like Intel and AMD though. I'm not sure, or graphics cards, or Nvidia getting into that, or Mac versus PC. Kind of where does that form of tribalism come from, and where does that spirit of the community originate? Because I don't think it is based off of utilitarian preferences and ideals. I think it is based off of, for some reason, some sort of like alignment or validation, but I'll have to kind of put more thought into that. But the main point of all this discussion is that I don't really want a community to be based around me as an activity and like my content and things like that. I think that's a really weird thing, and I think that that's something that I'm still going to struggle with in general. But in addition, I think that if I want to make the communities that I create be able to operate without me, they need to be kind of founded in that way. And I think I'm already trying that with Port Zero. And, in the past, kind of organizations like Elo Hell Esports and Spectre Fleet Gaming Corp, my two previous startups, both of them had a very kind of like a soft break where over time, the more work I did and more the community built, the less that it actually required my presence, or even to some point, my presence might have actually actively harmed it, and I was just kind of getting in the way of it operating and growing because it could do more and make better decisions than I could alone at some point. It's like it outgrow the person who was originally creating it and leading it. And I think that it's going to be quite a challenge, and I think that it's going to require a lot of learning and experimentation and iteration around how to kind of form these initial communities. And I think that, even in a group like Port Zero, where I do have a at least semblance of, an arm's length between the actual administration and the operation of the server, I'm still the person who has the original vision and ideology around kind of what that community could be. So that's just I want to create these communities that can kind of accomplish a lot of really cool things together. But how do I kickstart a spirit or a culture of a new group like that without adopting the prevailing culture of the members and their previous communities or ecosystems, and without forcing my spirit and the spirit of the community to be the same? And I think that, even if it's kind of like my personal beliefs, even if I codify my beliefs into culture, maybe that is kind of thing. It's like an education about, or indoctrination about my philosophies and beliefs around what makes a community function. So maybe that is an important thing for me to write about, kind of my belief. If people really trust me to build and run communities, and I think that experience shows that I'm pretty uniquely gifted at that for whatever reason it may be. Is it one of those things where that is something that could be taught? Is it something that could be operated by a collective, or like a council or a board or something like that? Or does it need to be kind of one individual? And then when you're talking about kind of differences in individual ability or the way people think, like neurodivergent versus neurotypical people, and myself being bipolar, is kind of the way that I look at things and the way that I actually act. Is that too affected or colored by my bipolar, where even if I did kind of codify what I did, how I did it, how I think about things, is it something that another person would even be able to do? Or is it kind of, even if the software, even if I copy down the software, is the hardware, the firmware going to be enough for it to operate without my sort of, don't want to say oversight, but I don't know the answer to any of these questions, which is really, really frustrating. And we'll have to see. The more I think about it, the more I think that variety content overall will just be better for me personally. I think that it'll allow me to kind of show a little bit more of my personality, because when I talk about streaming or anything, whenever I stream or play games, I like to kind of turn my personality up to 11. When I'm off stream or when I'm not doing anything performative, I'm pretty flat. I'm not very expressive. I'm not very emotional or anything like that. And when I do stream, I just kind of like take all those feelings that kind of pass through me, and it's the exact opposite of stoicism, where you kind of like notice the emotions going through you, you recognize them, but you don't let them affect you. And when I'm streaming, it's the exact opposite. I take those feelings and I force them to kind of maximally be expressed and feel them as fully as possible. And that's kind of how it manifests into how I perform as a streamer. But I can't turn something up to 11 if I'm bored, distracted, apathetic, or something like that. I still need to actually be engaged, find something funny, find something engaging, find something interesting. I need to have something authentic there, which I can actually amplify in order to be an entertaining individual. And I don't think that I can do that with the current state of like Overwatch ranked. Is there's also just like a lot of other politics and annoying things around it. And I think that once Overwatch League comes back, I can approach it from a much healthier perspective. But um, that's not ranked. I can do that when I'm covering the Dallas Fuel or talking about professional metas or doing kind of commentary and analysis on either players or teams or playoffs or predictions or things like that. Because those are things that I'm interested in rather than kind of just mindlessly solo queuing in ranked, regardless of the meta, quality of the community, quality of the games, etc. So, um, and the other thing being that I think that the other thing that I'm thinking about is the concept of kind of video games as being agency as art, which is I don't think I have this written down in my notes system actually yet. Oh, I have a string. Hello, string. Agency as art. Oh, that was 9. Oh, I do. Yeah, so this is something that I have to reread. T. Nigan wrote a book, Agency as Art and Thinking Art. And I also just want to kind of put a little bit more effort into thinking about play and experimentation, because I am going to be doing variety content, but I don't want it to be, I think that overall I take myself too seriously quite often. I overthink things. I take things too seriously. I'm extremely indulgent, extremely earnest, probably to a fault. And I would like to kind of take things less seriously, do them just more offhandedly or flippantly, play around, experiment, just to kind of see what it's like and loosen up a little bit, see if it kind of helps me with the kinds of ideas that I have, as well as the execution of those ideas. So we'll have to see where that goes. But I think it's going to start with, maybe I was originally thinking about, sticking to like Hades speedrunning to start with for a while. But I think that I'm going to jump around where and how much I'm interested in jumping around. So, even if I'm doing like Hades, Factorio, and Control all at the same time, it'll be a little bit interesting from the content side of things. But I think that we're just going to have to take things less seriously, do things that feel more naturally, do things that have a little bit more of a positive emotion associated with them and a higher interest, so that I actually have things that I can more easily amplify into an entertaining performance. And then while doing that, I suppose there's, the goals of wanting to align all of my work together so that not only am I live streaming, but I want to keep kind of thinking about things and codifying and solidifying my thoughts into, articles and blogs and video essays, so that I can have kind of long form thoughts that have been rigorously explored, defined, and explained in that variety. So, and I'm not sure. I thought that I'd be able to talk for a lot longer than this, but yeah, I got like 90 seconds left. Is there anything that I want to talk about for 90 more seconds? Yeah, I'm thinking about like whether the world's going to open up post-pandemic so that I can actually attend some homestands and do some emceeing or casting or stuff live at a stadium for an Overwatch League game or tournament. I think that'd be interesting. Thinking about kind of improving my performance skills as a talent member or content creator, on-camera talent for Envy for any of the shows. With the Vast and those, I think that I still have a lot of room that I could use to improve. I don't have any formal training, so maybe trying to do some professional development along with that, kind of just like learning voice acting, singing, stand-up, improv, things like that. My engineering background and my military background makes me extremely kind of analytical and not very expressive, and yet I find myself in essentially what is a fine arts career. So, a challenging shift, I suppose, in my career path. But all right, well, I am going to just float for the last 15 seconds as we reach the end of this, and then I'm going to upload it to YouTube. And I mean, in terms of getting my thoughts out, I think that this helped a little bit. but I don't know. It's not going to be nearly as nice for documentation. I'll have to figure out some way if I can get a transcript and annotate this with some of these thoughts, but maybe I just need to, I don't know. Maybe I just need to kind of write down conceptual things like this, just being a little bit more rigorous about it so that I can more easily go and find my thoughts about it. But alrighty then. Does this not end? I will just get rid of you. Bye.